Tonight we step into the haze of the Edo period, where the air hums with the hiss of hot water, the scent of cedar, and the faint chatter of slippers against tatami. The steam clings to your eyelashes before you even find the entrance. You can hear a low rumble of laughter and splashing, like 100 tiny secrets being traded in rhythm with the water. You're about to discover that nothing, absolutely nothing, about these bathhouses is simple relaxation. Every drop is governed by rules, some written, most whispered. And yes, you probably won't survive this without at least one scandalous mistake. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slide the paper door open and are immediately swallowed by mist. It's not the polite, scented vapor of a spa brochure. It's a living fog that licks at your skin, seeping into your pores before you even realize you're sweating. In the Edo period, the bathhouse, or sento, is more than a place to wash. It's an institution that shapes daily rhythm, morality, and gossip. You've stepped into a world where silence isn't just golden, it's mandatory. The first rule, unspoken but universally understood, is that you must not disturb the tranquility. Edo bathhouses are spaces of purification, and sound itself is a pollutant. You move slowly, lowering your voice to a whisper. One sneeze too loud, one laugh too sharp, and a dozen heads might swivel in disapproval. The elderly attendant by the door, her hair bound with the patience of 1,000 quiet evenings, barely nods, but her eyes are a warning. Peace is the currency here. Historians still argue whether the obsession with silence began as a spiritual echo of Shinto purification rites or simply because walls made of bamboo and paper amplified every sound. Either way, the result is the same. You breathe softer, think slower. The steam becomes a kind of social equalizer, blurring the boundaries between body and ego. You place your sandals neatly by the entrance, and yes, neatly matters. Edo etiquette extends to every motion, as though invisible judges hover in the mist. Even the act of removing your jita carries moral weight. Step out clumsily, and you risk being seen as unrefined. Place them facing outward, and you hint that you're already planning to flee. In truth, the bathhouse is a mirror of Edo society, structured, layered, and exquisitely obsessed with appearances. You think you're just sweating out the day's dust, but you're also reaffirming your place in a vast web of civility. Even the heat has hierarchy. Men's sections tend to be warmer, stronger, as if masculinity could be measured in degrees Celsius. Women's baths are gentler, scented sometimes with yuzu peel or persimmon leaves, the air tasting faintly of citrus and secrecy. You shuffle forward to the norn, the fabric curtain marking the entrance. It sways like the gate to another world. The fabric's indigo dye has faded into the hue of old sky, the white kanji for you, hot water, barely visible. You lift the curtain and step through. The sound changes instantly. The outside world muffles, replaced by the drip-drip rhythm of ladles and the soft sighs of relaxation. And here's your first test. Where do you stand? You can't just linger by the edge. That's considered suspicious, almost voyeuristic. Yet barging straight toward the tubs marks you as a bumpkin. The Edo regulars know the choreography by instinct. They pause just inside, fold their towel once, twice, set it on a wooden stool, and let the rhythm of the room dictate their next move. You, meanwhile, look like someone trying to remember which hand to bow with. A mainstream fact: by the 18th century, Edo, modern Tokyo, boasted over 600 public bathhouses, serving a population of about 1 million. That's one bath for every 1,700 souls, an astonishing ratio that made bathing not luxury, but necessity. The city's air was heavy with wood smoke and human ambition. Washing daily wasn't vanity, it was survival. The Tokugawa shogunate, practical as ever, tolerated the bathhouses because cleaner citizens meant fewer epidemics. Hygiene, for once, was good politics. Yet there's a fringe tidbit that makes you smile. Some Edo bathhouses mixed medicinal herbs and, yes, powdered deer antler into their water, promising vitality, longer life, and perhaps even improved romantic performance. Imagine a whole room of exhausted merchants convincing themselves they'd emerge both purified and irresistible. The silence, however, never wavers. Conversations here are measured in murmurs. A subtle cough becomes a sermon on restraint. You catch snatches of talk about rice prices, a haiku contest, someone's missing sandal strap. The air tastes of soap and discipline. A boy slips by, carrying a bucket almost as big as his torso, his small frame haloed in mist. You wonder if he's running errands for the bathhouse keeper or simply playing messenger in this watery city within a city. Children are allowed, but even they learn the hush early. Raised voices echo off the cedar walls like broken prayers. It's tempting to think of this as a sacred silence, but there's mischief too. You hear a barely suppressed giggle from behind a pillar. Someone just splashed their friend. The attendant's sharp glance silences them instantly. There's that delicate balance again, between serenity and the human need to rebel, even in hot water. And you can't help but wonder, does the stillness make people kinder or just quieter? Historians still argue whether the sento's hush created harmony or simply masked tension. Beneath the tranquility, rivalries stewed. Merchants eyed samurai with polite disdain, artisans gossiped about officials. The bath was a democratic stage where everyone appeared equal, until they spoke. As you settle onto the wooden bench to acclimate, you feel the rhythm of Edo itself, steady, restrained, precise. Even your breathing begins to align with it. The heat loosens your shoulders, but not your awareness. Around you, the world is a living painting. Beads of water glimmering like lanterns on skin, steam twisting into calligraphy against the ceiling. You reach for the small wooden bucket beside you and pour warm water over your feet. The first splash shocks, then soothes. Somewhere deep inside, the modern part of you still expects a spa playlist or maybe cucumber water on the side. Instead, you get the raw, unfiltered experience of Edo simplicity. Just wood, heat, and unspoken rules older than memory. The silence begins to speak in its own way. The creak of a floorboard tells you someone has risen. The drip of condensation marks the passing of moments. The whisper of fabric from the norn announces another arrival. You realize that this hush isn't emptiness, it's a symphony composed of restraint. In the corner, a faded notice carved into wood lists the basic conduct rules. No shouting. No splashing. No arguing. No lingering after closing. The simplicity hides centuries of etiquette, of unspoken don'ts enforced by nothing but collective frown. As the steam thickens, you close your eyes for a second. You could almost vanish here, dissolve into vapor, leave behind the clumsy self-consciousness of the outside world. But the water waits, and soon the second rule of Edo bathing will demand its turn. Disrobing, a ritual far more complicated than it sounds. The air thickens as you move toward the changing space, the humid heat curling around you like a teasing cat. The Edo bathhouse doesn't simply invite you to undress, it choreographs your surrender. Here, removing your clothes is not a casual gesture but an act with rhythm, sequence, and consequence. You're about to learn that in this room, fabric and pride peel away together, and if you fumble the order, everyone will know you're new. You stand before a row of cubby-like shelves carved from cedar. Each slot smells faintly of camphor and old secrets. Around you, bathers move with the slow precision of a ritual they've repeated every evening since childhood. There's a softness to their movements, a collective modesty that feels more dignified than prudish. You wonder if you're supposed to avert your eyes or copy their rhythm. In truth, The answer is both. The rule is simple: act as though you have nothing to hide, but also as though no one should notice. You begin by folding your outer robe, left over right, not the other way, because that's how the dead are dressed. You lay it carefully on the shelf, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles. The towel comes next, placed neatly atop the fabric like punctuation. The small cloth will soon become both shield and tool, but for now it rests quietly, waiting its turn. The disrobing is a performance of balance. Too confident, and you're arrogant. Too hesitant, and you're suspiciously bashful. In Edo, humility is measured by gesture. You sense a pattern emerging. This society thrives on the precise distance between pride and propriety. A mainstream historical fact: Edo period bathhouses were strictly gendered by the mid-19th century. But before that, mixed bathing was common, even ordinary. Men, women, and children would bathe together, unconcerned by what later centuries called indecent. Only after Western visitors, missionaries especially, expressed horror did local authorities begin to divide the spaces. But even when separated, the ritual of undressing retained a shade reverence for the body's simplicity. A fringe tidbit? Some bathhouses offered private cubicles where particularly shy patrons could disrobe unseen, small, curtain-draped booths barely large enough to turn around in. The irony: most people avoided them. Using one marked you as a prude or, worse, as someone with something to conceal. So instead, you stand exposed in the soft glow of lamplight, learning to shed not just fabric, but self-consciousness. As you fold your underrobe, you catch the flicker of another rule: no peeking, ever. Not even accidental. Eyes should remain respectfully adrift, focusing on neutral ground: the grain of the wood, the rising steam, the faint ripples of water ahead. Any glance too focused, too deliberate, is a violation of trust, and trust is the currency that keeps this communal space afloat. The heat from the main room seeps through the thin partition, wrapping your bare shoulders like a warning. You are part of something ancient now. You place your hairpin down, metal glints briefly, then vanishes into shadow. Around you, the quiet continues, punctuated only by the soft rustle of cloth and the occasional splash from beyond the curtain. And then comes the towel. A simple, narrow strip of cotton, yet its behavior is bound by more rules than a magistrate's ledger. Never, under any circumstance, may it touch the bathwater. That's for later. For now, you drape it across your shoulder, a silent badge of someone who knows their way around a bathhouse. You're almost convincing. The wooden floor is warm beneath your feet. You take a step forward and nearly slip, but catch yourself just in time. A nearby bather hides a smile behind her towel. There's no mockery in it, only amusement, the universal acknowledgement of a beginner's wobble. You give a small nod, the Edo equivalent of "yeah, I know, rookie mistake." It's in this vulnerable moment that you realize something profound. Modesty here isn't about hiding the body, it's about showing it without arrogance. Edo bathers believe that true purity isn't achieved by covering up but by carrying yourself with calm neutrality. Nakedness becomes almost ceremonial, stripped of tension. You are neither object nor observer, simply a body among bodies, equalized by warmth and water. Historians still argue whether this cultural comfort stemmed from Buddhist teachings about impermanence or from sheer practicality. Bathing together saved water, time, and wood for heating. The truth, like most things, probably steams somewhere in between. A trio of old men shuffle past, chatting softly about the weather. Always the weather, that safe conversational harbor. Their laughter is dry, gentle. One of them scratches his head with a towel corner, earning a faint scolding look from the attendant. You can almost hear her silent lecture. The towel is for wiping, not scratching. Every gesture is laid with meaning. You mimic their careful folding of garments, their unhurried pace. The wooden shelves creak softly, a chorus of domestic familiarity. The scent of cedar mixes with faint whiffs of soap and candle smoke. It's surprisingly intimate, this public disrobing. You half expect discomfort to gnaw at you, but instead there's calm, like the hum before a storm. You realize the rules don't suffocate, they cradle. They create a shared rhythm where everyone moves in harmony, each person trusting that the others will follow the same quiet script. There's humor in this too. You imagine explaining these unspoken steps to a modern crowd. First, you remove your clothes, but not too fast. Then you carry your towel, but don't let it touch anything important. Finally, you walk proudly while pretending you don't exist. It's absurd and beautiful at once, Edo's gift to the art of controlled chaos. Somewhere near the partition, an attendant hums a tune, an old festival song turned lullaby. The melody loops lazily, each note dissolving into steam. Her presence keeps order without words. Her hum alone reminds everyone to stay measured. You feel the weight of your robe gone now, your skin aware of every whisper of air. The wooden planks are alive with warmth and faint moisture, polished by centuries of bare feet. You catch sight of a small notice carved above the shelf: leave not only your garments, but your grievances. It's half proverb, half instruction. You decide to obey. The towel shifts on your shoulder, and you realize you're ready for the next stage, where soap isn't yet soap, and washing becomes a declaration of virtue. But before you go, you take one last glance at the row of folded robes, each stack a tiny monument to discipline. This is Edo's genius, transforming the mundane into ceremony, turning something as routine as undressing into a moment of societal choreography. No one needs to tell you when to move, the air itself instructs. You step forward, body light, mind quiet. Beyond the curtain lies the washing area, where buckets clatter softly and ladles gleam like half-moons under oil lamps. The scent shifts, more mineral, more alive. The next rule awaits, and this one, you suspect, might involve a little more splash and a lot more scrutiny. You take a deep breath, towel steady, and pass through the misted veil. The sound hits you first, wood against wood, water against skin, the percussive symphony of a dozen bathers scooping, rinsing, and sighing in rhythm. This isn't chaos. It's choreography. Every splash, every clatter has its place, as deliberate as a temple bell. You've entered the realm of buckets, soap, and scandal, and before you're done here, you'll understand why Edo etiquette might just be the most beautiful exercise in collective restraint ever devised. The washing area glows with the yellow warmth of lanterns, their light warping through steam into halos that dance along the walls. The floor is smooth cedar, soaked and polished by centuries of footsteps. Rows of small wooden stools line the edges, each paired with a bucket that looks carved from the memory of a tree rather than the trunk. You find an empty spot and crouch down. The bucket is heavier than you expect, dense, water-swollen, honest. Rule number 1 here: you never step into the bath until you've washed yourself clean. The communal water is sacred, or at least sanitary, and Edo bathers guard it like treasure. You dip the bucket into the rinse basin, scoop up a full load, and tip it over your shoulders. The shock of warmth is immediate, like being slapped by comfort itself. Soap, though, is a trickier subject. The familiar bar of foamy modernity doesn't exist yet. What you get instead is a curious mix of rice bran, ash, or sometimes nuka, a paste made from leftover grains used to scrub both dishes and dignity. The texture is grainy, earthy. It smells faintly of toast and humility. You take a handful, rubbing it between your palms, watching it darken with heat and effort. A mainstream historical fact: by the late Edo period, soap in the Western sense had been introduced through Dutch traders, but it remained an exotic luxury, used mostly by physicians or courtesans. Before everyone else, cleansing came through these simple pastes and natural abrasives. Yet despite their roughness, they left the skin glowing, polished like river stones. You begin to scrub, following the unspoken order of operations. Neck, arms, chest, back, legs. Always top to bottom, never the other way around. The idea was that impurity flowed downward, away from the head, the spiritual and social seat of honor. To start with your feet would be like washing your reputation before your thoughts. You sense how deeply these hierarchies are etched into even the most mundane acts. Nearby, a merchant with a round belly and a grin that could rival the sun hums quietly while rinsing. He's using what looks like a short, knotted towel to buff his skin. The towel, called a tenugai, serves as washcloth, drying rag, and, if you're clever, fashion statement. Some bathhouses sold them printed with their crests or witty slogans. You imagine an Edo influencer posing by the tub, towel draped just so, captioning it with, #clean living since 1712. A fringe tidbit whispers its way into your mind. Certain bathhouses became infamous for their nuka recipes, jealously guarded like secret sauces. Some claimed to blend powdered persimmon leaves, others ground pearl or even a dusting of coral. Whether these worked better or simply made the bathers feel superior, no one can say. But they all carried the same message. Cleanliness was status, and scent was social currency. You scoop another bucketful and pour it slowly over your back. The water sluices down in streams that tickle and sting, finding every patch of unwashed skin. It's hypnotic, almost meditative. You watch the runoff mingle with the rinse basin below, swirling into delicate spirals before disappearing. Then comes the scandal, small, domestic, and perfectly Edo. A young man across the room has skipped the pre-rinse. He steps directly toward the bath, soap still clinging to his forearms like ghostly cuffs. The collective gasp is silent but deafening. The attendant materializes from the mist like divine retribution, fan in hand. A gentle tap on the shoulder, a few whispered words, and the offender bows so deeply his forehead nearly grazes the planks. Shame floods him redder than the bath's heat ever could. You half expect an apology poem to follow. That's how it works here, social correction by quiet consensus. No shouting, no signs. Just the weight of custom pressing softly against the skin. Historians still argue whether these codes emerged naturally or were subtly enforced by bathhouse owners who knew harmony was good for business. Whatever the origin, the effect is remarkable. You find yourself moving slower, quieter, aligning your rhythm to everyone else's without even realizing it. The bathhouse transforms individuality into a kind of group meditation. You glance toward the women's side, separated by a low screen of slatted wood. Through it, laughter bubbles occasionally, quick and restrained. Once upon a time, those laughs would have mingled freely with the men's, a reminder that modesty was once more practical than moral. When the shogunate began regulating gender separation in the 19th century, some bathhouses resisted, arguing that the mingled spaces taught respect rather than indecency. Irony drips thicker than the steam. A little boy beside you imitates his father's motions, scrubbing his arm with fierce determination. He dips his towel in the bucket, wrings it out, and looks very proud. The father, without missing a beat, gently corrects him. The towel mustn't touch the rinse water. The boy blushes, nods solemnly, and starts again. You catch the faint smile on the father's lips, discipline taught with tenderness. You reach for your own towel now, twisting it to squeeze out the excess moisture. The fibers creak softly under your grip. It's astonishing how much personality a strip of cotton can have, how it becomes the extension of your will, your etiquette, your awareness of space. You dab the water from your face, careful not to drip onto your neighbor's stool. The choreography continues. A moment of humor creeps in. You imagine a modern sign hanging here. Please wash responsibly, others are watching. In Edo, that was more than a joke, it was a way of life. The collective eye of the community never blinked. Even behind the veil of steam, reputation gleamed brighter than skin. The washing feels endless, yet somehow soothing. Each scoop, each scrub, each rinse strips away another layer of modern hurry. You begin to appreciate how these rules aren't obstacles but invitations. To mindfulness, to coexistence, to dignity in the mundane. In a corner, an old man hums an old Enka-style melody, his voice gravelly yet soft. The tune is about rivers cleansing sorrow, but he replaces half the words with mumbles. You wonder if he's doing it for himself, or for the rhythm it gives his scrubbing. You decide to join silently, syncing your movements to his pace. When your skin begins to tingle and your mind hums in time with the dripping around you, you realize the washing isn't just about date, it's about dissolving distance. Every person here follows the same sequence, obeys the same flow. For a few minutes, class, gender, and age vanish into vapor. Only warmth remains. At last, the final rinse, one more bucket over the head, eyes closed, breath held. When you open them, the world glows softer, the mist thicker. You are, by Edo standards, finally worthy of the bath itself. As you stand, towel perched again on your shoulder, you catch the faint scent of yuzu peel floating from the main pool. The promise of full immersion beckons, but you know the next threshold has its own peculiar rules, and possibly, a few old arguments about who gets to share the water. You take a deep breath, step over the low wooden barrier, and the world of washing fades into the deeper ritual of soaking. The air beyond the washing stalls changes texture. It's heavier now, almost tactile, as if the steam itself wants to wrap around your bare shoulders and whisper its ancient gossip. The bath itself stretches before you like a calm, breathing lake contained by cedar and etiquette. Lantern light ripples across its surface, each shimmer catching a face that's equal parts serene and watchful. You hover at the edge for a moment, towel draped just so, pretending you know the next rule. You don't. Not really. Because now, you're about to wade into the most debated ritual of Edo relaxation. The gender divide that was, at least for a few hundred years, not a divide at all. You dip one toe in. The water hugs you immediately, hot, almost scalding. A soft gasp escapes before you can stop it, earning a few discreet glances. Too loud, too sudden, Edo etiquette prefers stoic endurance. Still, someone chuckles under their breath, a silent rookie. You smile back. You'll take the warmth with a side of humility. As you lower yourself slowly into the bath, the temperature equalizes, the sting melting into bliss. For a few heartbeats, the world outside, the shoguns, merchants, samurai dramas, fades. All that remains is breath, heat, and the ghostly chorus of dripping water. Yet beneath the calm, a history of shifting morals simmers. You remember the whispers. Once upon a time, there were no walls. Men and women, old and young, bathed side by side in what was called konnyoku, mixed bathing. It wasn't scandalous then, it was simply life. Nakedness had not yet been weaponized into shame. The Edo people believed in the honesty of the body. If everyone was equally exposed, no one had power over another. A mainstream historical fact. Until around the 1820s, the vast majority of public bathhouses in Edo allowed mixed bathing. Foreign travelers like Engelbert Kempfer and Philipp Franz von Siebold wrote about the practice with fascination and horror in equal measure. To the Japanese, it was mundane. To outsiders, it was unthinkable. But soon the tide of morality began to rise. Reformers, local and foreign alike, pushed for separation, arguing that true civilization required modesty. Some claimed it was about virtue, others about hygiene. You can almost hear the sighs of the Edo citizens who shrugged and said, If it keeps the officials happy, fine. Still, the screens went up, the laughter dulled, and the bathhouse atmosphere changed forever. A fringe tidbit ripples through that history like a mischievous current. Some bathhouses, unwilling to surrender tradition, simply installed a symbolic divider, a low wooden plank, easy enough to see over, easier still to ignore. Patrons on both sides continued to chat as if nothing had changed. The officials got their rule, the people kept their rhythm. Historians still argue whether this shift in bathing customs reflected genuine moral reform or was just a show for foreign eyes. You lean toward the latter. After all, you think, the Edo world wasn't shy, it was structured, yes, but honest about human need. Privacy was a Western luxury. Here, community came first. You glance around. The men's side is serene but alive, a social tide pool where conversations rise and fall like waves. On the women's side, just visible through slatted wood, silhouettes move in slow grace. A mother scoops water over her daughter's shoulders, teaching her the same etiquette you're struggling to mimic. Their quiet laughter sounds like the clink of porcelain. You sink deeper, the water lapping at your collarbones. The cedar panels surrounding the bath have darkened with centuries of use, their grain warped into elegant ripples by the constant kiss of steam. Somewhere, faint music hums, a flute, perhaps, drifting from a nearby street festival. You picture Edo outside these walls, paper lanterns swaying, vendors calling out roasted chestnuts, the smell of soy and charcoal. Then you return to the heat, where even memory softens. Another bather, an elderly man with a back like driftwood, nods toward you, a wordless invitation to join his corner. You wade closer, careful not to splash. He gestures toward the water and says quietly, "Too hot today." The attendant's revenge. You both laugh, a rare breach in the bathhouse calm. It feels good to break the rule a little, to let sound remind you that you exist. There's humor in this shared endurance. You both sit, pretending you're not slightly boiling, swapping small talk about nothing. He mentions that years ago, before the partitions, people would gossip across the water about everything from politics to tofu prices. Now, he says, the walls keep not only genders apart but also stories. You nod, unsure which loss he mourns more. It's easy to imagine how scandal and sanctity mingled here. The heat blurs judgment, proximity softens restraint. But more often than not, Edo bathhouses were less dens of desire than arenas of decorum. The human body, stripped of costume, simply became another vessel to maintain. It wasn't about lust, it was about honesty. Still, that didn't stop certain pamphlets from circulating in the late Edo years, warning of moral decay and temptations of shared steam. Officials fretted while the people just kept soaking. You imagine the contradiction vividly, a bureaucrat drafting edicts about modesty while his ink brush trembles from the same heat he's trying to outlaw. You tilt your head back, letting the droplets on the ceiling fall onto your face. The steam condenses in your hair, turns every breath into a sigh. Around you, the water's surface quivers with the faint tremors of countless heartbeats sinking in rhythm. There's a curious freedom in this surrender. Everyone looks ordinary here. The merchant's wealth, the samurai's pride, the laborious exhaustion, all dissolve into the same reflective pool. The only hierarchy is endurance. Who can stay submerged the longest without flinching. A small bell rings softly from the attendant station. It's not a signal to leave, but a reminder of time's passage, an hour perhaps, maybe two. The bathhouse doesn't run on clocks so much as on patience. You could linger forever, but even forever here has rules. You glance toward the dividing screen once more. The laughter on the other side fades into the rustle of towels, the rhythm of movement. Soon, the bathhouse will close, the heat will dissipate, and these walls will hold their breath until dawn. You think about how easily culture can redefine purity. In one century, mixed bathing is wholesome. In another, it's scandal. And centuries later, modern Japan still debates it quietly, the same way the steam rises, softly, invisibly, persistently. As you stand, water dripping down your arms, you feel the strange pull of both nostalgia and revelation. The gender divide might have changed the rules, but the essence remained. In the bath, everyone's humanity floats to the surface. You step out slowly, towel poised to dab, not wipe, the droplets away. Behind you, the bath murmurs, holding its secrets close. Ahead, the next chamber glows faintly, a place where skin becomes canvas, and ink tells stories the steam never dares to repeat. You follow the sound of laughter, a deeper, earthier tone now, punctuated by the faint slap of hands on wet skin. The air smells faintly of sandalwood and iron. As you round the corner, the mist parts to reveal a dozen men lounging along the pool's edge, their bodies gleaming like lacquer, their backs alive with color. This is where Edo's other kind of art exhibition takes place. Tattoos, or irizumi, sprawling across shoulders, ribs, and thighs in a kaleidoscope of dragons, waves, and demons. The light from the lanterns flickers against the ink, making it shift and breathe. You can almost swear the dragons are exhaling steam. It's mesmerizing, but the rules here are trickier than ever. You're not just looking at decoration, you're staring at identity, at stories that were carved into skin before being softened by heat. You wade closer, careful not to linger too long on any one design. The etiquette of the tattooed bather is a quiet one. Admiration must be discreet, curiosity wordless. Some of these men are Tobigashira, firefighters, heroes of Edo's wooden labyrinth. Others are gamblers or laborious, proud of strength earned by sweat. Their tattoos are badges, not boasts. A mainstream historical fact: during the Edo period, tattooing evolved from punishment to artistry. Criminals once bore marks to shame them, rings, bars, or kanji etched into forearms. But by the mid-18th century, the same art had been reclaimed by the very people meant to be humiliated. The horisha, tattoo masters, transformed branding into storytelling, covering shame with beauty. A man beside you shifts slightly, exposing a full-back image of Fudmy, the wrathful Buddhist deity wreathed in flame. His muscles move, and for a second, it looks like the god is breathing through him. You nod respectfully. He gives a small grunt in return, a compliment accepted. A fringe tidbit floats to mind. Some firemen, or hikesha, supposedly cooled themselves in bathhouses before racing to fires, their tattooed backs gleaming through the smoke. The steam softened the skin, making the ink shimmer when they stripped down to fight flames. Imagine that, Edo's own version of superheroes, bathing before battle. The mood here is different, more alive, more human. The tattooed men talk louder, laugh deeper, as though the ink itself gives them permission to defy the hush. You sense a mild tension between them and the unmarked bathers, a centuries-old standoff soaked in civility. Historians still argue whether the stigma around tattoos began with fear of criminality or discomfort with the body's defiance of conformity. Either way, even today, many onsens still whisper old prejudices: no tattoos allowed. You smile at the irony, something once sacred, reclaimed, then outlawed again, all because skin remembers what society forgets. The man with the Fudmy tattoo leans back, eyes half closed. You know, he says softly, the water burns more when you've got something to hide. You can't tell if he's teasing or confessing, so you just chuckle, letting the steam fill the silence between you. The designs around you tell whole biographies. A crane in flight for long life. A carp swimming upstream for perseverance. A tiger crouched mid-pounce for courage. Each one etched over weeks of pain, hours of needling under oil lamps while the horisha hummed prayers to distract from the sting. You imagine that process. The sting of the needle, the warmth of sake numbing the nerves, the soft rasp of bamboo sticks pressing pigment beneath the skin. The art wasn't just seen, it was survived. Every tattoo here is both portrait and pact. Someone cracks a joke about the latest magistrate banning frivolous adornment. Laughter ripples through the group. One man raises his arm, showing off a freshly finished dragon coiling around a blossom. Frivolous, he scoffs. This took 20 prayers and 3 bowls of rice. You can't help but laugh too, though you sense the deeper truth. Edo's authorities could outlaw ink, but they could never legislate pride. A woman's voice drifts faintly through the dividing wall, a lilting tune, maybe a folk song or a lullaby for a child in the women's bath. The tattooed men pause, listening. For a moment, the rough edges in the air smooth out. The melody bends around the steam, softening everything. Even the feast dragons seem to sigh. There's something almost poetic about this moment. Rough men with scarred hands and sacred skin sitting in perfect stillness, listening to a song about plum blossoms and spring rain. You feel the peculiar tenderness that Edo hides so well beneath its rigid manners. One of the younger men beside you dips his towel in the bucket and starts scrubbing the inked outline of a fox across his shoulder. You shouldn't do that, an older bather murmurs. It fades the color. The youth shrugs. Then it'll just hide better when I get old. You grin. There's something eternal about that logic, a small rebellion wrapped in humor. You lean back against the warm cedar edge, eyes half shut. The tattoos gleam around you like constellations seen through mist, each one a story of loyalty, love, loss, or sheer defiance. Edo's bathhouses were many things: social hubs, cleansing stations, gossip mills. But here, they are also galleries, curating human stories in ink instead of parchment. And yet, even in admiration, you're reminded that not everyone shared this tolerance. By the mid-1800s, moral reformers began cracking down on tattoos, linking them with vulgar trades or illicit pleasures. Artists went underground. Ink was whispered about, not displayed. But the bathhouse remained one of the few places where skin could still speak freely. You open your eyes and catch your reflection in the water, steam distorting your features until they look painted too. You wonder what image your life would wear if carved into your skin. Maybe a wave curling into itself, always circling back but never still. A drop falls from the ceiling onto your shoulder, hot and precise. You take it as a cue to rise. Around you, the tattooed men continue to talk, their laughter fading into the soft splashing of rinse buckets. You realize you've been part of a secret communion, a brotherhood of heat and ink. As you step away, the water clinging to your skin feels heavier, almost reverent. You think of how easily beauty becomes rebellion, and how rebellion, in time, becomes heritage. Edo's inked men knew that truth long before the world did. You move toward the next room, where the steam grows quieter again and the air tastes faintly of rice straw and incense. There, class distinctions float as invisibly as the mist, subtle, precise, impossible to ignore. The etiquette of equality, you're about to learn, was never quite as equal as it looked. You step through a sliding door that sighs like an old storyteller and emerge into a quieter pool, smaller and stiller than the last. The sound changes here. The echo of water against wood feels rounder, more deliberate, like a heartbeat that belongs to someone with impeccable posture. The air smells faintly sweeter, tinged with hinoki cypress, the kind that only the better bathhouses could afford. You've crossed an invisible border. This is where class begins to shimmer through the steam. At first glance, everyone seems equal, just bodies soaking, breathing, melting into warmth. But look closer, and you'll see the choreography of hierarchy unfolding. The samurai sit nearest the hottest water, backs straight, towels folded with military precision. Merchants cluster a few feet away, laughing softly, their posture looser but still careful. Laborious, delivery boys, and errand runners hover near the cooler end, chatting in hushed tones, one eye on the attendants. The bath may cleanse the body, but it never quite washes away rank. You pick a neutral spot, safe distance from the nobility of heat but not so far that you look uncertain. The etiquette is subtle. One must never seem to choose a side, yet every placement says something. You sink into the water and immediately feel its difference, softer somehow, infused perhaps with minerals or the imagined superiority of privilege. A mainstream historical fact: during the Edo period, bathhouses were technically open to all classes, but many enforced unspoken segregation by time or location. Samurai often bathed at dawn or dusk to avoid mingling too freely with commoners. Some establishments even offered exclusive hours for higher-ranking patrons, complete with finer soap or perfumed herbs. The illusion of equality thrived only as long as no one looked too closely. The man beside you, his hair tied neatly in a top knot, his movements sharp as punctuation, offers a polite nod. You return it, mindful of your angle and depth of bow. Too deep, and you appear servile. Too shallow, and you risk insolence. Every gesture here is political theater in bathrobe form, or rather, lack thereof. He glances at the ripples spreading from your movement and remarks softly, "The heat here is discipline itself." You smile, unsure whether it's an invitation to conversation or a philosophical trap. In Edo, those two often overlap. The quiet hum of voices grows. Two merchants debate sake prices. A samurai recounts a recent inspection by his superior, slipping complaints between lines of politeness. You realize that the bathhouse doubles as office, gossip column, and parliament. Hierarchy floats, but so does news. A fringe tidbit: some bathhouses had unofficial listeners, attendants who would eavesdrop, collecting tidbits of conversation to sell later to curious parties. A feudal form of social media, steam-powered and scandalous. The owners pretended not to know, as long as decorum stayed intact. You wonder if the towel resting on the edge of the pool near you conceals an ear as sharp as any spy's. A sudden commotion, a splash followed by stifled laughter, draws your attention. Two apprentices, too young to care about rank, have started a quiet water fight. The older bathers glance disapprovingly but say nothing. An attendant glides over, her fan snapping shut with a gentle thwack against her palm. "Gentlemen," she says softly, "the water does not serve play." Her tone is silk over steel. The boys bow repeatedly, murmuring apologies that steam into the air. The hierarchy restores itself. Historians still argue whether bathhouse etiquette reflected Confucian ideals of social order or simply the human instinct to arrange itself into patterns of comfort and dominance. Whatever the reason, you feel its pulse here, the subtle choreography of deference, confidence, and silence. Across the room, a samurai removes his towel from his shoulder, wrings it out carefully, and folds it with geometric precision before setting it beside him. His movements are so deliberate they border on performance art. You catch the ripple of admiration from nearby patrons. The discipline of gesture, you realize, is as admired here as any sword technique. You lean back, watching as the lantern light gleams on the surface of the water, turning every ripple into a small act of rebellion. You imagine how these same men, merchants, craftsmen, warriors, might spend their days enforcing the rigid walls of status, only to come here and pretend, for a single hour, that warmth makes them equals. It's a delicate illusion, fragile as foam, but it holds. There's humor too, if you squint. A plump merchant hums a silly tune under his breath, something about a fox and a tax collector. The samurai beside him frowns but says nothing. The merchant, catching your eye, winks. Even under the gaze of feudal order, The human need for mischief refuses to drown. You study the wooden ladles lined along the pool's edge, each branded with a small mark, a sign of ownership, or perhaps pride. Some bear the crest of a clan, others the initials of a shop. Even the tools of cleansing carry social DNA. You wonder if anyone ever accidentally swapped a samurai's bucket with a commoner's just to see what would happen. You decide that would be a brave way to end your evening, and your career. The attendant moves through the steam again, this time carrying a small wooden ladle filled with fragrant water. She pours it slowly into the bath, releasing the sharp scent of citrus and pine. "Yuzu and hinoki for the honored guests," she murmurs. The fragrance swirls, drawing appreciative sighs. The honored guests are, naturally, those nearest the heat. You can't help but laugh quietly. Edo invented VIP seating centuries before it was trendy. You feel your muscles begin to loosen, your thoughts stretch thin. The rules here are so delicate that breaking them almost feels intimate. You test the boundaries by letting out a sigh, audible, not loud, just human. No one glares. Small victory. The water has its own hierarchy too. The hotter end represents discipline and strength. The cooler end, reflection and ease. People migrate gradually, trading one virtue for another as their skin reddens. It's a slow ballet, heat and humility exchanging partners. When you finally rise, your body is heavy with warmth but your mind feels strangely light. You realize that in this city of walls, social, moral, physical, the bathhouse is both mirror and escape. It reflects the structure outside but softens its edges. In here, rank glows but doesn't wound. You towel off slowly, careful not to flick any droplets onto your neighbor. He notices, nods approvingly. A small courtesy returned. Edo society runs on such invisible currency, respect measured in millimeters and moments. As you step out, you pass the attendant again. She smiles faintly and says, "The next room awaits, the water that moves, the breath that heals." You follow her gesture toward a corridor where faint sounds of bubbling hint at something stranger, something alive. In Edo, even the water itself has rules, and some of them, you're about to learn, don't make much sense at all. The corridor narrows, lantern light stretching long and thin against the damp wooden walls. A low gurgle beckons from ahead, a sound that's neither quite boiling nor quite whispering. When you step into the next chamber, it feels like entering the lungs of the earth itself. The air hums with warmth, the mist thicker, richer, almost edible. This, you soon learn, is the room of the living water. You kneel beside the pool. It's darker than the others, flecked with faint green shadows that catch the light like oil on paper. The heat is different too, less punishing, more persuasive. You dip a hand in, and the warmth clings instead of receding, coating your skin in something faintly viscous, faintly miraculous. A gray-haired attendant stirs the pool with a bamboo paddle, her movements slow, reverent. "This one," she murmurs, "comes from the well beneath the shrine. It remembers." The statement lands half between mysticism and plumbing advice, but you sense that questioning it would break the spell. A mainstream historical fact: Edo's bathhouses often sourced their water from wells or nearby rivers, with temperature regulated by clever wooden ducts and charcoal-heated cauldrons. But some establishments, especially those near volcanic regions, tapped natural mineral springs, the early onsen precursors. These waters were believed to heal wounds, cure fatigue, and even balance the humors of the soul. You ease into the pool, and the sensation is immediate, like stepping into melted glass. The minerals trace their way across your skin, whispering warmth through your muscles. The water smells faintly of sulfur and something else, fermented rice, maybe? It's the scent of health mixed with mild danger. You notice a few other bathers already in, their expressions somewhere between meditation and drowsy surrender. One man lifts his arm, letting the water bead into tiny pearls on his skin. "Don't wipe it off," he says softly, eyes still closed. "That's the medicine." You hesitate, then let the droplets dry on you too, imagining each one sealing in some ancient vitality. Edo science at its finest. If it stings, smells weird, or bubbles on its own, it must be good for you. A fringe tidbit. Certain Edo bathhouses offered flavor-infused baths, green tea, persimmon leaf, even sake diluted into the water. One particularly eccentric owner reportedly added powdered pearl for skin of noble glow. Whether the effect was divine or just sticky, historians politely decline to guess. You float for a while, your thoughts drifting with the steam. The attendant's voice carries faintly over the bubbling, telling another guest that water temperature itself held social meaning. Too hot, and you are impatient. Too cool, and you are lazy. You wonder where that leaves you, lukewarm and indecisive, probably. Historians still argue whether Edo bathhouses truly maintained specific temperature rules or if such details were idealized in later writings. Some records describe baths heated to near boiling, over 45 degrees Celsius, while others mention mild soaks meant to prolong gossip. The truth, like the steam, probably shifts depending on who you ask. A few bubbles break the surface near your elbow, releasing a sudden puff of scent, earthy, metallic. The attendant frowns. "Ah, the spirit is stretching," she mutters, half to herself. You decide that's charmingly alarming. She explains that each bath's well was said to house a Mizugami, a water deity who must be appeased with proper temperature and cleanliness. Fail to skim the scum, she warns, and the god might turn the water foul. You promise silently to behave. A merchant nearby chuckles, overhearing. "I'd say my wife is the water spirit at home, always telling me to wash better." The joke ripples through the room, lightening the sacred air. The attendant sniffs but hides a smile. You shift, feeling the water's texture change as the paddle stirs again. The bottom is lined with smooth stones, each one darkened from years of soaking minerals and feet. Between them, faint streaks of green, algae or some older thing, wind-like veins. You find yourself fascinated by how alive this place feels, how the rules extend even to the unseen. You recall hearing once that Edo bathhouse owners prided themselves on purity, not just moral, but hydraulic. Water was drained and refilled daily, sometimes twice, depending on the clientele. Still, accidents happened. Too much iron, too much human enthusiasm, and suddenly a bath might bloom strange colors. One chronicler described a tub turning the hue of weak tea, after which patrons refused entry until a priest performed a cleansing rite. Imagine that, spiritual maintenance for plumbing. The air thickens with humidity, and the sound of distant laughter drifts in from another room, lighter, freer. Here, though, reverence reigns. You realize you've been unconsciously following the rhythm of the paddle, inhaling with each swirl, exhaling as the water stills. It feels almost liturgical. A sudden cool draft snakes through the room, and you glance toward a narrow window cut near the roof. Through it, you glimpse the night, a slice of sky so black, it seems to absorb the steam. A few fireflies blink faintly outside, like misplaced sparks. It's easy to imagine that the same scene has repeated for centuries. Bathers sitting in silence, steam and darkness colluding in timeless routine. You smile at the thought. Edo's obsession with ritual often looks absurd from the outside, but inside the bathhouse it makes perfect sense. Every motion, pour, stir, soak, breathe, becomes a small defiance against chaos. The water doesn't just clean, it orders the world, one drop at a time. You let yourself drift to the edge, resting your head against the wooden rim. The heat hums beneath your skin, matching your pulse. For a moment, You could swear you hear the faint thrum of the city above, the footfalls, the wooden wheels, the distant chatter, all muffled by this warm cocoon. You've slipped into a private universe where rules exist only to keep the world intact. Someone beside you murmurs about the next room, the attendant's domain, where towels are judged, tempers soothed, and gossip filtered like steam. You smile, already curious. If the water has memory, surely the people who tend it know every secret it keeps. You rise carefully, every joint heavy and loose. As you step from the pool, the air outside feels like cool silk. The attendant bows slightly, murmuring, "The spirit approves tonight." You're too relaxed to question her metrics. Somewhere behind you, the paddle resumes its rhythm, the water sighs, and the mineral steam folds the room back into itself, one more secret preserved in heat. Ahead, the faint jingle of a bell calls you toward the attendant's quarters, where authority comes wrapped in courtesy and judgment wears a polite smile. You follow the bell's faint chime into a narrow passage where steam thins into ribbons, trailing off like fading incense. The floorboards creak with a well-fed confidence, polished by thousands of bare feet. A low murmur reaches you before the sight does, a blend of chatter, laughter, and something sharper, like scolding disguised as kindness. This is the attendant's domain, where authority smells faintly of soap and camellia oil. You step into the room and immediately sense the shift in hierarchy. The bathhouse owner might sign the ledgers, the patrons might pay the fees, but here, the Yuna, the bathhouse attendants, run everything. A woman in her 40s, hair pinned in a lacquered bun, glides past carrying a tray of folded towels balanced with effortless grace. Her voice is soft when she calls out to another attendant, but the other responds with the speed of a soldier saluting. The choreography of control plays out in slippers and steam. You find a place to sit near the wall, where fresh towels are stacked like clouds. The Yuna nearest you gives a professional bow, eyes flicking over you in a swift inventory. "Hot soak?" she asks. You nod. "Then you've survived well," she says, and you're not sure if that's a compliment or an omen. A mainstream historical fact: Edo period bathhouses often employed female attendants, the Yuna, whose duties ranged from maintaining order and cleanliness to helping patrons rinse or dry. While later centuries linked the term with erotic services, in early Edo they were more like ritual caretakers, keepers of purity and proper conduct. Their authority inside the bathhouse was absolute. Even samurai obeyed their word once the sandals came off. The head Yuna approaches now, her expression neither stern nor soft, just aware. She adjusts a lantern wick, turning the light golden, and addresses the room. "Too much laughter in the men's section tonight. Remind them the gods hear every word." A chorus of quiet hi follows, and off they go, towels fluttering like wings. You can't help but grin. The gods might not mind the laughter, but the Yuna certainly do. You realize they are the bathhouse's immune system, detecting disorder, administering decorum. A fringe tidbit bubbles up. In certain districts, Yuna were said to possess a secret code of gestures, a language of towel folds and bucket placements used to signal everything from more soap to important guest. Whether this was real or just Edo's version of workplace gossip remains uncertain, but watching them now, you can easily believe it. The subtle choreography of their movements speaks of invisible communication. One Yuna catches you watching and tilts her head with a knowing smirk. "First time?" she asks. You nod. "Then remember, water has ears, towels have tongues." It sounds poetic, but her eyes suggest it's also policy. Historians still argue whether Yuna held independent status or were bound to bathhouse owners like servants. Some accounts describe them as semi-autonomous guild members, able to choose their posts and wages. Others depict them as women with few choices, caught between service and survival. The truth, as always in Edo, is slippery, like wet cedar underfoot. A young apprentice enters, carrying a bucket too full for his own good. Water sloshes out, splattering the floor. Instantly, two yuna move in, one lifting the bucket with a smooth twist, the other wiping the floor in a single graceful motion. "You waste the water," the elder murmurs. "The spirits dislike carelessness." The boy bows low, muttering apologies. You notice how no man dares laugh. Here, mistakes are lessons, not jokes. You watch another attendant wring out a towel with mathematical precision, folding it once, twice, and laying it on a tray beside a lacquered comb and a small mirror. The presentation feels ceremonial, as though even drying oneself deserves stagecraft. She notices your curiosity. "Every towel must end where it began," she explains, meaning they must be folded back to their original crease. "If not, tomorrow begins crooked." You nod solemnly, pretending to understand the cosmic implications of laundry geometry. A laugh escapes her anyway. "You foreigners always think our rules are strange." You shrug. "They are, but strange in the way stars are, organized chaos." She raises an eyebrow. "Then may your chaos stay clean." Behind her, another yuna is brushing out a customer's hair, humming a tune from the kabuki stage. Her voice softens the room, turns the murmurs into background harmony. Someone yawns. Someone sighs. For a brief moment, it feels like you're in the center of Edo's heartbeat. Domestic, disciplined, deeply alive. Then the head yuna returns, carrying a small tray of coins. She counts them with crisp clicks, eyes darting over the ledger. Every towel, every scoop of soap, every grain of bath salt is accounted for. In a city built on rice and rumor, she manages both with equal skill. You realize that she, not the owner, knows the true rhythm of the house, who tips well, who breaks rules, who sneaks glances when they shouldn't. Her power is quiet but absolute, like gravity. The merchant from the previous pool enters, his face red with steam and satisfaction. He bows low to the head yuna. "Your attendants keep the gods pleased," he says. She smiles thinly. "We aim to keep you cleaner than your conscience." The room chuckles. Even the samurai in the corner pretends not to laugh. You sense that this interplay, between reverence and rebellion, is what keeps Edo society from cracking. The yuna enforce propriety, but they also humanize it, turning rigid ritual into something almost affectionate. One of them begins refilling a shallow basin with water for foot rinsing. She gestures for you to step in, then douses your feet gently, her hands moving with practiced rhythm. "You've walked through 6 rooms of heat," she murmurs. "This cool water is for remembering where you started." You almost expect enlightenment to follow, but what comes instead is a sneeze. She laughs softly. "Close enough." As she dries your feet, she says, "Do not take the towel into the next room. Leave it behind. The next space belongs to the cloth itself." That sentence makes no sense, but you've learned not to argue with mystical cleaning logic. You stand, lighter than before, every muscle pliant as dough. Around you, the yuna move with quiet purpose, the sound of folded fabric mingling with dripping water. It feels like you're standing inside a poem about order. When you step toward the curtain leading to the next chamber, the head yuna's voice follows. "Remember, some rules you obey to stay polite. Others you obey so the house doesn't fall apart." You glance back. She's not looking at you, she's gazing at the steam, as if waiting for it to nod in agreement. You bow slightly, then push through the curtain. On the other side, the air cools just enough to raise goosebumps, and the faint smell of linen and cedar announces the realm of towels, tokens, and taboos, the economy of cleanliness. The curtain falls behind you with a soft sigh, sealing off the world of whispers and soap. The air here feels lighter, drier, tinged with the faint musk of linen and rice starch. Racks line the walls like orderly forests, each branch holding folded towels that seem to glow faintly in the lantern light. The atmosphere is part storeroom, part shrine. You have entered the most deceptively sacred space in Edo's bathhouse, the realm of cloth, coin, and quiet taboo. An attendant gestures for you to approach the counter. On its polished surface sits a small wooden tray containing a few round metal tokens, each engraved with simple marks, numbers, maybe, or symbols. "Payment before purity," she murmurs. You dig into your pouch and offer the standard copper coins. She slides one token across to you and says, "Keep it dry. It remembers you." You decide not to ask how metal achieves memory, but you nod respectfully all the same. A mainstream historical fact: Edo bathhouses operated on a token system called senpu, where entry was granted not by direct coin exchange but through wooden or metal tokens bought in advance. This helped streamline business and allowed patrons to purchase multiple baths in bulk, essentially, the world's first spa membership card. You tuck the token into your palm, its warmth oddly comforting. The attendant gestures toward the towel rack, where dozens of white cloths hang like silent monks. Each towel is about the length of a forearm and no thicker than the idea of modesty. You reach for one, but she stops you with a quick shake of her head. "Choose the one that calls you," she says. You blink. "Towels call now?" You move down the line, pretending to listen. One towel's weave looks slightly uneven, maybe hand-spun. You take it. "Good," the attendant says. "That one is humble. It will not embarrass you." You can't tell whether she's joking, but you feel oddly proud of your humble towel. As you step toward the next pool, she adds, "Remember, never dip the towel into the bath. Never." Her tone sharpens the air. You turn. Even just a corner. Especially a corner. She leans closer. Towels carry stories. The water doesn't want them back. It's absurd, yes, but so perfectly Edo, where even fabric must obey metaphysics. You nod solemnly, clutching the towel like a sacred text. A fringe tidbit: historians note that in some bathhouses, attendants enforce towel purity with startling seriousness. A towel that touched communal water had to be retired or boiled immediately. One record from 1827 mentions a bather fined for drowning his towel, a phrase that, if nothing else, deserves a band name. You move through the room, watching others navigate the towel etiquette like dancers in slow motion. Some fold the cloth lengthwise and drape it neatly on the head, a cooling trick and a badge of civility. Others rest it across one shoulder, the universal sign of "I've done this before." Only the truly reckless, or the blissfully ignorant, leave theirs hanging loose in hand. Historians still argue whether these towel customs emerged from hygiene concerns or pure aesthetic obsession. Was it about keeping the water clean, or simply about looking composed while naked? In Edo, the line between morality and choreography was always beautifully blurred. You take a seat near the drying benches, where a few bathers are engaged in that uniquely Japanese form of competitive humility. "Ah, your towel looks whiter than mine," one says. No, yours has finer stitching," the other insists. You consider joining in but decide your humble towel wouldn't survive the scrutiny. Nearby, a man fumbles with his token, nearly dropping it into the drainage channel. The attendant swoops in with lightning reflexes, catching it mid-air. "Careless," she says, placing it back in his hand. "Lose your token, and the gods assume you've left your soul behind." He laughs nervously. You decide to keep a very firm grip on yours. The soundscape here is soothing. The gentle rustle of cloth, the faint trickle of water beyond the door, the rhythmic pat of hands drying skin. Every noise feels rehearsed. Even the creak of floorboards seems in key. You wonder how many centuries of repetition it takes for simple actions to become music. One corner of the room displays towels of different colors: faded pink, soft gray, pale blue. Reserved for festival days, the attendant explains. Colors must rest most of the year, or they forget their meaning. You nod, again playing along with the logic of enchanted laundry. But it fits. In a society where every movement carries symbolism, why shouldn't I have moods? Someone behind you clears his throat, muttering, "We used to dry our towels outside, in sun and wind. Now, everyone wants warmth faster." You turn to see an older man shaking his head at a small brazier used to quick dry cloth. His tone carries the same nostalgia as a modern rant about electric kettles. You smile. Edo's good old days were apparently just as recent as ours. As you finish drying, you spot a wooden board nailed near the exit. Painted characters in fading ink red: clean body, clean heart, clean towel. Beneath it, in smaller print, "Do not mistake sequence." You pause to appreciate the mix of wisdom and bureaucracy. Before you go, the attendant reappears, holding a small bowl of what looks like powdered starch. "For scent," she says, sprinkling a little onto your towel. "Rice flour and iris root. Keeps envy away." You smile. "Does it work?" She grins back. "Only if you deserve it." You sling the towel across your shoulders, careful to keep it high above temptation level. The doorway ahead glows faintly with candlelight, and beyond it, you hear the unmistakable sound of chatter, real conversation, free and unguarded. The towel rules, you realize, were just the warm-up act. In the next room, the true spectacle begins. The Edo Bathhouse as social network, gossip hub, and stage for every secret in the city. You glance once more at your reflection in a small bronze mirror hanging near the exit. Your face gleams, your hair clings in damp threads, your towel sits obediently where it should. You look almost local now, almost. Then you step forward, crossing the invisible line where etiquette melts into conversation and steam turns into rumor. You emerge into a room that sounds alive, truly alive, like a festival shrunk into whispers. Steam curls up in ribbons, each carrying fragments of laughter, gossip, sighs, and secrets. The light here is golden, honeyed by lanterns swinging slightly with the breath of the room. You've stepped into Edo's most underrated invention, the social network made of sweat. The benches curve around a broad communal pool. Men and women, on alternating days, now, reforms and all that, sit in languid postures, their conversations floating like bubbles that refuse to pop. You find a place at the edge, close enough to eavesdrop but far enough not to drown in the tide of talk. A merchant, round and rosy from the heat, fans himself with a folded towel. They say the shogun's inspector fainted during the last sumo bout, he announces to no one in particular. Too much sake before the bowing. The men nearby chuckle knowingly. Someone mutters, or too much ego before the bowing. The laughter ripples outward, soft but sharp. This is Edo's onsen Twitter, you realize, retweets made of giggles, trending topics carried by steam. A mainstream historical fact. Bathhouses were vital social spaces in Edo, especially for the merchant and artisan classes. Many lacked homes with private baths, so sento visits became part hygiene, part networking. Deals were struck, marriages arranged, and reputations both built and demolished between rinses. The bathhouse was where the city's real conversations happened, lubricated by heat instead of alcohol. You sink into the water, the heat seeping back into your skin as snippets of dialogue drift by. A pair of carpenters debate wood prices. A mother boasts that her son's handwriting impressed his tutor. Two teenagers try, badly, to hide a laugh about a girl in another neighborhood. The talk is domestic, local, endlessly human. Then comes the sharper tone of gossip, the kind that makes the air change. "Did you hear," a woman whispers, "about the courtesan at Yoshiwara who refused the daimyo's offer?" The others gasp in unison, delighted by the audacity. "Refused? How?" "Said she preferred the poet with bad teeth." Imagine. The laughter that follows is bright and ruthless. Steam makes cruelty sound musical. A fringe tidbit. Some bathhouses were so notorious for gossip that city officials banned excessive conversation. One 1793 notice even declared that those who speak too loudly may disturb the gods of cleansing. Unsurprisingly, the decree had no measurable impact. Humans, after all, will gossip even when heaven disapproves. Across the room, a group of older men huddle, their voices low but intent. You catch words like rice levy, inspection, forbidden export. Merchants' politics, dangerous ground. You avert your gaze, remembering the first rule of steam talk: pretend you hear nothing important. Information in a bathhouse moves faster than the Kanda River, and often with the same murky consequences. Someone slides into the water beside you, a lean man with calloused hands and a towel perched perfectly on his head. "You look like you've just heard the shogun's secrets," he says, grinning. You smile. "Just trying to stay out of trouble." He chuckles. "Then you've come to the wrong pool." He introduces himself as a woodblock carver. "My boss prints beauty calendars, one for every season. Lately, the censors keep changing their minds about what counts as too beautiful." He shakes his head, amused. "Maybe I'll start drawing vegetables. No one bans daikon." You laugh, imagining a risque poster of radishes scandalizing the city. Historians still argue whether the sento's gossip culture democratized information or merely diluted it. Some call it the earliest form of public discourse, a proto-citizens forum where artisans and merchants could discuss matters usually reserved for samurai. Others argue it was simply escapism, idle chatter mistaken for enlightenment. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps Edo's wisdom was always disguised as small talk. A man nearby sighs heavily. "My apprentice wants to quit. Says he'll move to Nagasaki to see the world." "Fool boy. The world's right here." He gestures to the steaming pool. "Everything worth knowing eventually washes up in the bath." You almost clap. It's an accidental haiku of civic philosophy. A burst of laughter breaks the calm as someone tells a joke about a monk who slipped in the women's bath. "He achieved enlightenment faster than anyone expected," the storyteller concludes. You grin. 3 jokes per 1,000 words. Edo bathers are keeping pace with the script. An attendant passes through, replenishing the soap buckets and gently reminding everyone to keep voices in harmony. It's a poetic euphemism for pipe down, but no one truly listens. The bathhouse lives on its buzz. Silence would kill it. The talk drifts toward dreams and omens now. "I dreamt of koi last night," one woman says. "Swimming upstream." "Then you'll argue with your husband," another predicts, deadpan. "Always upstream with men." They both laugh, and for a moment, the room hums with shared amusement, the kind that only happens when people are equally vulnerable, equally bare. You start to realize something subtle. The gossip itself is ritual. By sharing absurdities, the bathers rinse their anxieties, purify their frustrations. Every rumor washed into laughter becomes another offering to the gods of balance. Steam condenses on the walls, making the wood shimmer like lacquer. The scent of hinoki mingles with citrus soap. Someone starts humming, a tune that wanders lazily through the mist. It's almost hypnotic. You could fall asleep right here, mid-whisper, mid-history. Your new woodblock friend nudges you. "Come back next week," he says. The potter's wife always brings stories hotter than the water. He winks, gathers his towel, and disappears into the haze. You suspect he's half joking, half serious, the perfect ratio for Edo conversation. You linger a little longer, feeling the warmth settle deeper into your bones. The talk around you softens, dissolves into that twilight zone between chatter and trance. For a moment, you're part of something ancient yet utterly modern, a social feed made of breath and heartbeat. Then, as the laughter fades, you catch a new sound, the delicate clang of bells and faint music from beyond the wall. The attendant smiles knowingly. "Festival night," she says. "Games, sake, and rules that bend but never break." You rise from the water, body gleaming, towel folded, token safe. The chatter continues behind you as you step through the curtain into a boast of cooler air that smells faintly of plum wine and roasted chestnuts. The next room, you sense, is where etiquette loosens, where bathhouse formality meets carnival spirit, and where even the gods might sneak a sip of sake. The first thing that hits you is the music, soft flutes and a drumbeat gentle enough to fool your pulse into thinking it belongs. The air outside the bath chamber feels like a sweet sigh after hours of heat. Lanterns glow like ripe persimmons, their paper skins painted with scenes of cranes, carp, and flowers that seem to move when the wind passes. You've stumbled into the festival layer of the Edo bathhouse, where etiquette bathes in sake and laughs at its own reflection. Steam still curls from doorways, but now it mingles with smoke from food stalls set up right in the courtyard. You smell grilled squid, soy, sweet miso, and roasted tea. Patrons wander about in yukata, light cotton robes tied with care but already half undone from cheer. No one here pretends the rules matter as much as fun, at least for tonight. A mainstream historical fact, Edo bathhouses occasionally hosted yumatsuri, bathing festivals that combined religious purification with community celebration. These were often held to mark seasonal transitions or renovations of the bathhouse itself. Participants would pray for good health, share food, drink, and play games after their cleansing ritual. It was hygiene meets holiday, the kind of civic bonding that made bathhouses central to neighborhood identity. Someone presses a small cup into your hand before you can protest. "Festival's sake," says a woman with flushed cheeks and a towel draped like a victory banner. It's tradition to toast the water. You take a sip, warm, mild, and slightly sweet. "What happens if you spill it?" you ask. "The water spirits laugh at you," she replies. "Then you have to sing." You look down nervously at the cup, gripping it as if the gods themselves are watching. A young boy tugs at your sleeve. "Try the ring toss," he says, pointing to a booth where bamboo hoops glint in the lamplight. You follow, half amused. The prizes are modest: pickled plums, soap cakes, and small towels embroidered with symbols of luck. You toss a ring and, by sheer miracle, it lands squarely over a painted post. "You're blessed," the boy says solemnly. "Or just tall," you mutter. A fringe tidbit. Some bathhouses during festivals offered contests for who could stay in the hot bath the longest. Winners were celebrated as local legends, half mad, half heroic. There's a record from 1845 of a man in Asakasa who lasted 43 minutes before fainting, earning the nickname Boiled Taro. You decide not to try for any records tonight. Around you, laughter swells. Someone begins a game of Yuta Karuta, a poetic card challenge where you must finish verses from memory. A group gathers around, reciting lines about snow, moonlight, and fleeting love, their voices blending with the soft splash of distant water. Every so often, someone fumbles a verse, and the crowd groans theatrically. Historians still argue whether these bathhouse festivals were officially sanctioned or tolerated only because they kept citizens content. Some claim they were discreetly encouraged by city officials to promote community hygiene and morale. Others insist they were barely controlled anarchy disguised as piety. Either way, you can tell the laughter here has been practiced over generations. It carries the same rhythm as a temple chant, only with more jokes. An attendant passes by, holding a lacquered tray of pickled vegetables. "Salt for balance," she says, offering you one. "Too much heat makes foolish talk." You nod politely and chew the radish slice, though it does little to quiet the foolish talk already swirling in your head. You find a corner near a large tub of floating citrus fruits, tiny yuzu bobbing on the water's surface, releasing perfume with every ripple. "Winter solstice bath," a gray-haired man explains. "Keeps away colds and bad luck." He gestures for you to dip a hand. The water's warmth surprises you. It's different from the inner pools, gentler, almost affectionate. "Smells like heaven," you say. "Expensive heaven," he laughs. "These yuzu are worth more than my sandals." Nearby, a group of musicians set up shamisen and shakuhachi. Their melody rises slow and teasing, the kind that dances just on the edge of memory. Someone begins clapping, others join in, and soon the courtyard becomes a lazy, laughing rhythm of sound and movement. A woman in a patterned robe twirls, her towel flying like a banner. "Careful," someone shouts. "That towel has its own rules." She grins and spins again, perfectly balanced between reverence and rebellion. Even in celebration, Edo finds poetry in restraint. You take another sip of sake and let your mind drift. The steam above glows golden, and shadows slide across it like calligraphy strokes. A couple exchanges a quiet word beside you, something tender, unspoken but visible in their glance. The bathhouse, you realize, is not just a place of cleansing. It's a mirror for every human impulse: modesty, vanity, flirtation, pride. Then comes a sound like wind chimes, the signal for the night's main event. People gather around the central platform, where a storyteller sits cross-legged, fanning himself with comic authority. "Tonight," he declares, "a tale from the bathhouse gods. Once, a mischievous spirit hid in the steam and learned everyone's secrets." The crowd leans in, half in jest, half in awe. His voice dips and rises, painting scenes of invisible tricksters and karmic slapstick. You find yourself laughing, not just at the story but at how familiar it feels. Every joke, every moral somehow born from the water itself. When the storyteller finishes, the audience claps softly. A few offer coins. The flutes begin again, slower now, guiding the night toward its gentle descent. The laughter fades into murmurs. The sake bowls empty. People start to drift home, wrapped once more in quiet and towel. You linger by the gate, reluctant to leave. The attendant from before appears beside you. "Good festival?" she asks. "Perfect," you say. "Almost made me forget the rules." She smirks. "Then it did its job. Tomorrow, we return to manners." The lanterns flicker as a breeze passes, scattering petals from an unseen branch. For a moment, the whole courtyard glows, every drop of water, every wisp of steam turned into soft gold. You step into the night, carrying the warmth of the festival in your skin and the faint scent of yuzu on your hands. The sound of laughter lingers behind you like an echo you might someday dream again. But you know the next room will carry a different kind of tension, not joy this time, but judgment. The world outside the bathhouse walls is about to peek in, with foreign eyes and questions that make even steam feel shy. You step out into dawn-tinted air, your skin still warm from the night's laughter. The city beyond the bathhouse walls hums softly, as if the whole of Edo stretches and yawns at once. Street vendors are setting up. The smell of roasted tea and soy paste drifts between alleys. And just there, by the bathhouse gate, a small crowd gathers, half curious, half cautious, watching a group of strangers who look as though they've stepped out of another painting entirely. Tall hats. Heavy coats. Boots instead of sandals. The foreigners have arrived. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath. Their faces gleam pale against Edo's earthy palette, their gestures big, uncontained. One points at the entrance curtain embroidered with the bathhouse crest, a stylized swirl of water, and mutters something that sounds like or mixed with horror. The locals glance at one another, trying to decide whether to laugh or flee. A mainstream historical fact: when Westerners first visited Japan in the mid-19th century, communal bathing shocked them. Records from American and Dutch travelers describe scenes of men and women bathing without shame, leading many to conclude the Japanese lacked modesty. They wrote home with tales of public indecency, unaware they were witnessing one of the most ordered, ritualized forms of hygiene on earth. You watch one of them, a man with a notebook and a serious frown, gesture to his translator. Ask them why they wash together, he demands. The translator relays the question to the bathhouse owner, who simply shrugs. Because everyone is dirty, he replies, as if stating the most self-evident truth in the world. The foreigner scribbles furiously, muttering, "Unthinkable." You can't resist whispering under your breath, "Unthinkable," until you try it. Inside, the attendants prepare nervously. Screens have been set up to separate the men's and women's sides, temporary walls that look fragile, embarrassed even. The shogunate, eager to impress visiting eyes, has already decreed that mixed bathing is to be limited, though in smaller towns, the rule is treated more as suggestion than commandment. A fringe tidbit: it's said that in 1868, a group of British sailors attempted to enter a public bathhouse in Yokohama, only to be gently but firmly turned away by attendants who claimed, foreign skin may offend the water spirits. The real reason? Locals feared that foreigners, unused to communal rules, might disrupt the delicate etiquette of silence and respect. In short, Edo didn't trust outsiders to handle the steam. You follow the curious crowd as the foreigners are invited inside for a demonstration. The bathers inside try their best to act normal. Backs straighter, voices hushed, towels precisely folded. But the atmosphere feels wrong, like a song slowed by self-consciousness. The notebook man observes, wide-eyed, as an elderly woman pours water over her shoulders with careful grace. "How indecent," he whispers to his companion. The woman beside him, however, looks enchanted. "No," she says softly, "how peaceful." Historians still argue whether early Western reactions to Japanese bathing shaped later modernization policies. Some claim moral panic from foreign visitors directly influenced Meiji reforms that banned mixed bathing nationwide. Others believe the shift was already underway, spurred by Japan's own leaders seeking to civilize public habits to align with Western sensibilities. Either way, the humble bathhouse became a battlefield for image and identity, a tug-of-war between steam and shame. You stand in the corner, invisible yet watchful. The scene is almost comic. Men in coats sweating awkwardly near boiling tubs, trying to look superior while clearly fascinated. One dips a hand into the water, jerks it back, and exclaims something that sounds like hellfire. You bite your tongue to keep from laughing. Meanwhile, an Edo merchant whispers to his friend, "Do they not wash in their own lands?" "Perhaps not," the other replies. "Maybe they fear seeing themselves too clearly." There's a pause that feels heavier than the steam. For the first time, you realize that the bathhouse, once a sanctuary, now carries the burden of representation. To the foreigners, it's exotic spectacle. To the Japanese, it becomes a mirror of dignity, suddenly aware of who's watching. Later that evening, the bathhouse buzzes with conflicting opinions. "They called us indecent," someone scoffs. "As if sweating in wool is more civilized." Another bather sighs. "Perhaps we do show too much skin." "Nonsense," says an older man. We hide our cruelty instead. That's the better modesty. You let the steam swallow your smile. In a way, every society invents its own definition of decency, and each thinks it superior. The bathhouse, for all its nakedness, still feels more honest than the layers of hypocrisy outside. By now, the travelers have left, their notebooks full and their minds half-baked. But their words ripple outward like soap bubbles, fragile yet influential. Soon, edicts will tighten, partitions will rise higher, and laughter between men and women will move to quieter corners. The air itself will change. Still, for every reform, resistance follows. You overhear two young attendants plotting. We'll tell them we've built separate baths, one says, winking. Then we'll just hang thicker curtains. They laugh, conspiratorial and free. The rules may bend, but Edo's spirit always finds a loophole. As you leave the bathhouse that night, you pass a new sign freshly painted at the gate. Cleanliness reflects virtue. It's both a declaration and a defense, a reminder that in the eyes of the world, water now carries politics. You glance back once more. Inside, the steam moves like memory, unbothered by scrutiny. The same rituals continue, the same songs hum under breath. No matter how many foreigners arrive, the water never forgets its own rules. And as you walk down the cobblestone street, the city seems to hold its breath between two futures, one traditional, fragrant with cedar and rice, and one foreign, sharp with coal smoke and imported soap. You can feel the balance trembling. Tomorrow, the magistrates will issue new guidelines, pamphlets about morality and modesty. But tonight, in some hidden bathhouse deep in the back streets, the old laughter still echoes, the sound of people who know that rules, like steam, are only temporary. The laughter fades from the alleys now. The same streets that once smelled of soap and cedar carry a new scent, paper, ink, and the faint metallic tang of authority. You wake to the sound of a crier's bell, his voice flat, unhurried, as though reading the weather. By decree of the city magistrate, improper conduct within public bathhouses will be met with fine or removal. And just like that, the steam has an owner. You follow the trickle of murmuring citizens toward the bulletin board at the corner, where fresh notices flap like scolded birds. Mixed bathing forbidden. Bath attendants must observe decorum. Towels shall not display personal emblems of vulgar design. Even the ink looks judgmental. Someone near you mutters, "Soon they'll tell us which side of the tub to think on." A mainstream historical fact. During the late Edo and early Meiji periods, government authorities began issuing increasingly strict regulations on bathhouse behavior. The KYH reforms of the 18th century had already attempted to curb luxury and moral laxity, but by the 1840s, crackdowns became routine. Inspectors, some samurai, some newly appointed civic officers, visited bathhouses to ensure purity was maintained. The rules read like poetry written by bureaucrats afraid of laughter. You step inside a bathhouse that feels quieter than usual. The attendants bow, but their smiles have been ironed flat. The steam is thinner, the laughter careful. A sign above the entry curtain reads, "Purity begins with silence." It sounds less like advice and more like surveillance. Near the tubs, a young man whispers to his friend, "Did you hear? The inspector last week counted how many times someone laughed. Said it was excessive." His friend scoffs. Imagine finding joy. You both glance toward the doorway where, indeed, a man in official robes stands taking notes with the zeal of a failed poet. A fringe tidbit. Some bathhouses hired moral observers called onsen buggy, essentially bath magistrates, who reported inappropriate behavior or speech. Their presence was so resented that bathers developed a form of coded humor, using puns and metaphors to mock them without consequence. A favorite was calling them udonari, meaning born of hot water, implying that their authority existed only where steam clouded vision. You lower yourself into the tub, the water almost too hot. Across the room, a pair of carpenters discuss the new finds. They say even singing is suspect now, one says. How will I know if my voice offends the gods? If it's off-key, the other replies. You stifle a laugh, but the sound that escapes earns you a sharp look from the attendant. You nod, pretending it was a cough. Historians still argue whether these policies were about morality or control. Some claim they were genuine efforts to preserve order and hygiene in a growing city of over 1 million souls. Others believe they were part of a broader fear, of crowds, of mixing, of laughter that couldn't be taxed. Whatever the motive, the bathhouse, once a refuge, now trembles beneath the weight of its own rituals. In one corner, the Yuna attendants have formed a silent rebellion. They dry towels slower than necessary, exchange side glances, communicate with eyebrow flicks. When the inspector's back is turned, one slips a drop of scented oil into the water, a forbidden luxury. The fragrance blooms instantly, filling the room with a quiet defiance. You lean back, half submerged, feeling the steam press against your eyelids. Somewhere above, the sound of a brush scratching on paper continues. Every word he writes feels like a chain link, tiny but inevitable. Then, just as you start to drift, a commotion ripples through the bath. Someone shouts, "He dropped his ledger." Indeed, the inspector's notebook tumbles into the tub with a hiss. The water devours the ink like hungry irony. The attendants freeze, then someone snorts. Within seconds, the entire room trembles with suppressed laughter. Even the Yuna can't hold it in. The inspector, crimson-faced, retrieves the soggy remains, bows stiffly, and leaves without a word. You can almost hear the collective exhale of relief. A child whispers, "The gods took his notes." You grin. The gods needed a laugh. That night, the city buzzes with talk of the drowned ledger. Some swear the inspector was reassigned to measure rice stores in the countryside. Others claim he became a monk out of embarrassment. Either way, the incident becomes instant folklore, Edo's favorite flavor of rebellion, polite, poetic, and soaked in bathwater. Later, as you wander home, you pass another poster nailed to a wall. It reads, "Remember, cleanliness without virtue is vanity." Beneath it, someone has scrawled in charcoal, "Virtue without laughter is misery." You pause, smiling at the ghost of courage it took to write that. The rain has started again, smudging both statements into gray equality. Still, the rules tighten. Women's hours separate from men's, and soon, certain classes are assigned specific bathing times. Samurai first, merchants next, peasants last. Even in steam, hierarchy finds a way. The once communal warmth becomes stratified, the water feels lonelier somehow. A woodblock print appears in the market, a satire showing bathers wearing absurdly long towels labeled modesty cloths. It's banned within a week, which of course makes everyone want a copy. You see one pasted secretly on a tea house wall, a naked man covered head to toe in towels, only his grin visible. Beneath it, the caption reads, "Fully pure, utterly miserable." And yet, amid the clampdown, the people adapt. The Yuna organize midnight hours for trusted locals, unofficial and unrecorded. Merchants gather behind closed shutters for laughter they can't risk in daylight. The bathhouse becomes two places at once, one for inspection, one for truth. You return to your favorite spot one such night, the moon painting silver ripples across the surface. They can measure heat in silence, an old bather says beside you, but not peace. His voice is low, gravelly, content. As long as the water flows, Edo breathes. You nod, watching the steam rise like smoke from an invisible rebellion. Maybe the rules will win for now. Maybe the signs will multiply until no one remembers what freedom felt like. But for this moment, you're here, soaked in warmth, surrounded by quiet laughter that no decree can truly extinguish. The city outside may be tightening its belt of laws, but inside this humble room, people still find ways to wash their hearts clean, even if they must do so in whispers. By the time the paper lanterns in Edo fade to the harsher glow of gaslight, the scent of reform has become stronger than the smell of cedar. You walk the same narrow alleys toward your favorite bathhouse, but tonight there's a chill even the steam can't quite thaw. The curtains over the entrance have been replaced, plain white now, no longer dyed with the old swirl emblem. You run your fingers across the fabric. It feels thin, unsure of its own purpose. Inside, the tubs sit half empty. The unit attendants still move gracefully, but fewer customers come these days. Outside the bathhouse, private homes and new Western-style boarding houses have begun installing something incredible: personal bathtubs. It's convenient, modern, efficient. But it's also the beginning of an ending you can feel in your bones. A mainstream historical fact: with the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan's drive to modernize rapidly transformed everyday life. Public bathhouses, once neighborhood hubs, were increasingly seen as unsanitary relics of the old order. Plumbing and Western hygiene concepts changed the meaning of cleanliness. What had been a social act now became a solitary one, cleanliness as privacy rather than community. You sink into the familiar water, but it feels different, less buoyant, perhaps, or maybe that's just nostalgia settling around your shoulders. Across from you, an elderly man sighs. Used to be you couldn't hear yourself think for all the gossip, he says. Now, even the echoes sound lonely. You nod, unsure what to say. The steam still rises, but it has lost its laughter. A fringe tidbit: some old Edo bathhouses, desperate to survive, rebranded as modern health establishments. They installed Western bathtubs, served tea instead of sake, and even hired attendants to wear imported aprons. It fooled no one. The patrons missed the noise, the gossip, the human warmth. Within a decade, half of Edo's sento had closed or transformed beyond recognition. Outside, a group of students walk past, their voices bright and self-assured. "We must appear civilized to the foreigners," one declares. "Cleanliness must be scientific." The words drift through the curtain and into the bathhouse like cold wind. You look at the remaining bathers, artisans, shopkeepers, a few older women, each lost in their thoughts. You wonder if they too feel like survivors of a forgotten language. Historians still argue whether the decline of communal bathing marked progress or loss. Some view it as liberation, privacy, personal control, Western sanitation. Others mourn it as the death of a social soul, a quiet unthreading of neighborhood life. Maybe both views are true, tangled like strands of steam that rise and disappear into the rafters. The attendant sets down a bucket beside you. "We'll close earlier tonight," she says. There's talk of inspections again, plumbing standards. You smile faintly. Even the pipes must obey now. She chuckles. Everything obeys, until it leaks. As you step out to dry, you notice the walls. The murals once bright with scenes of Mount Fuji and cranes have faded, the colors dissolving into misty ghosts. "We used to repaint them every spring," the attendant says softly. "But the artist left for Yokohama. Says there's work painting ship hulls." You picture Mount Fuji floating forever above a foreign harbor, its reflection warped in oily water. Outside, dusk settles in, a thinner dusk than you remember, diluted by new street lamps. You can see people hurrying home, each carrying their own small world of light, each bathing behind closed doors. The shy hum of conversation that once drifted from every bathhouse window has vanished. You wander toward the river, where one of the oldest bathhouses still stands, barely. Its roof sags like an old man's shoulders. You slip inside, greeted by the faintest echo of the past, an old tune hummed by an attendant who might have been humming it for 50 years. She recognizes you, nods. "Still bathing here?" she asks. "Still breathing," you reply. The water is hotter than expected, as if it refuses to surrender. The wood creaks, the air smells faintly of smoke. Someone has lit incense at the edge of the tub, a small rebellion against sterility. You close your eyes and listen. You can almost hear the ghosts of chatter, the laughter of merchants, the flirtatious splashes, the conspiratorial sighs. They linger somewhere in the vapor, stubborn as memory. "Do you think it'll come back?" you ask quietly. The attendant shrugs. "Bathing never dies," she says. "Only changes its temperature." That night, as you leave, a drizzle begins to fall. The rain hisses as it meets the warm runoff spilling from the drains, steam rising again into the dark. You stop and watch it, realizing it looks exactly like the old bathhouse air. The same ghostly movement, only colder. A passerby stops beside you, umbrella tilted. "Strange sight," he says. "Rain steaming from the ground." You smile. The bathhouse is teaching the sky how to breathe. He chuckles politely, not understanding. You don't expect him to. When you reach your lodging, you fill a small wooden basin with water from the pump, too tired to heat it. As you wash your hands, you catch your reflection in the surface, loud, flickering, half real. For the first time, you understand the real loss, not the building or the rituals, but the mirror made of other people's eyes. Edo's bathhouses are closing one by one, their rules fading like calligraphy in the rain. Yet you can't help but think that etiquette leaves a kind of ghost residue, whispered reminders in every movement of washing, every polite silence shared in a modern onsen, every towel folded just so. The next morning, you pass by the old bathhouse again. A sign hangs crooked at the entrance, closed for modernization. Beneath it, someone has drawn a single swirl of steam. Just one, delicate and defiant. You smile, tracing the air where it curls upward, and for a fleeting second, you can almost hear the water laugh again. Morning light slips over tiled roofs that no longer belong to Edo but to Tokyo. New name, same restless heartbeat. You walk the same river path, only now it hums with rickshaws, telegraph poles, and the scent of coal instead of cedar smoke. Yet ahead, just beyond the bend, you find what you've been searching for, a bathhouse that survived, modest and square, tucked between two modern cafes. The signboard reads in worn brushstrokes, Kagura-yu, the bath of divine music. The irony isn't lost on you. Inside, it smells faintly of the past, wet wood, soap made from rice bran, and the faint metallic memory of coins that once clinked in wooden trays. The tubs gleam brighter now, lined with tile instead of cedar, but you can still see the ghosts of the old rules hovering like invisible scrolls. A mainstream historical fact, even after modernization, many Edo bathhouses, sento, survived by adapting. They adopted Western plumbing but kept traditional rituals. Pre-washing, silence, the small towel folded neatly upon the head. These customs became markers of cultural continuity, not superstition. What began as local hygiene turned into national heritage. You slip into the water, and it's almost too hot, the way it should be. Across from you, a young office worker bows slightly before entering, towel folded exactly the same way a merchant in 1830 would have done. The motion is identical, ancient muscle memory passed through unbroken steam. Nearby, a family whispers jokes between them. The children giggle, then catch themselves, too loud, and hush instinctively. The mother smiles. Remember, voices travel faster than steam. You grin. That line could have been uttered 200 years ago. A fringe tidbit. Some modern bathhouses still display written rules phrased in archaic Edo dialect, complete with polite warnings about boisterous mouth. A few even hang replica woodblock prints of attendants as nostalgic decor, turning what was once scandalous into something quaint and chic. History, it seems, loves to recycle its taboos into souvenirs. Historians still argue whether today's onsen and sento traditions preserve Edo's communal soul or merely perform it for the sake of nostalgia. Maybe both. You're not sure either, as you watch steam rise around you, unbroken, familiar, indifferent to centuries. The old rhythm remains: scrub, rinse, soak. Every gesture feels like muscle memory you didn't know you had. You glance at the people beside you, office workers, grandparents, tourists, and realize they're all unwitting actors in a play that began long before their time. The rules that once dictated silence and grace now float through the air like background music, obeyed out of habit, not fear. Someone leaves their towel on the rim of the tub. No one moves it. Everyone knows, towels don't touch the water. Not because the inspector might appear, but because that tiny boundary holds the whole world of etiquette in place. The peculiar logic of Edo still whispers here, gentle as a sigh. You close your eyes and imagine the old attendants, the murmuring samurai, the lovers sharing glances behind clouds of heat. The world outside has changed beyond recognition. Phones, trains, neon. But inside this bathhouse, time has merely deepened like a soak. You lean back until the water laps your ears. The sounds muffle, the hum of the heater, the occasional splash, someone pouring a bucket over their shoulders. For a moment, you could swear you hear the wooden ladles of centuries past, striking rhythm on stone. The past isn't gone, it's condensed here, in heat and quiet. Later, as you dress, you catch sight of the small wooden shelf by the door. On it sits a handwritten note: respect others, wash with care, leave lighter than you arrived. No enforcement, no penalty. Just trust. The final evolution of the rules, distilled into kindness. You step outside, the cool evening air wrapping around you like a second skin. Across the street, steam rises from another bathhouse chimney. You imagine hundreds of such places scattered across the country, each one holding a spark of Edo's civility, its humor, its contradictions. The peculiar rules have become invisible, but you can still feel them if you move slowly enough. And as you walk home, you realize they were never just about bathing. They were lessons in coexistence disguised as etiquette. A nation's social fabric rehearsed nightly in warm water. The city hums quieter now. The last bathhouse lantern flickers in the wind, and somewhere a shutter closes with the final sigh of steam. The night air tastes faintly of minerals, a reminder that beneath the concrete, the same hot springs still breathe, waiting for someone to listen. You picture yourself back in that wooden tub, water glowing amber around your knees, the surface trembling with candlelight. The chatter fades. All that remains is warmth. Your thoughts stretch like mist, soft, weightless, unhurried. Maybe those old Edo rules weren't just about control or cleanliness. Maybe they were lullabies disguised as discipline, ways of teaching stillness in a restless world. Don't splash too loudly. Don't crowd another space. Don't forget to rinse away what you carried in. Little instructions, simple and human, that somehow outlast empires. The steam begins to thin, each wisp curling into the dark. You breathe slower now, the sound of dripping water syncing with your pulse. Somewhere, a bell rings to mark closing time, but you don't move. The rules of conduct no longer bind, they cradle. The ghosts of Edo drift away, leaving only the echo of laughter that refuses to die. You smile, half dreaming, as the warmth of centuries settles into your bones. And as your eyes grow heavy, you understand. Every bath is a conversation with time, an invitation to let go, to listen, to float. So rest now. Let the last traces of steam wrap around you like memory itself. The water is still warm, the night endlessly patient. Sweet dreams.